This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mali's coup leaders face widespread condemnation as AU calls for the release of former President Keita. South Sudan Army holds disarmament in the northern part of the country. And Kamala Harris accepts U.S. Democrat Party's vice presidential nomination. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. South Africa's businesses crumble after lockdown economic restrictions. And in your sport, CAF sets new dates for postponed 2022 World Cup and 2021 AFCON qualifying fixtures. We start off in Mali, where Colonel Assimi Goïta has emerged as one of the coup leaders. Goïta is facing widespread backlash following the forced resignation of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The AU and ECOWAS have suspended Mali from their decision-making bodies. Astatal has more on the ongoing situation.
From ECOWAS to the AU and the UN, Mali's coup leaders are facing widespread condemnation. In his role as AU chairperson, Cyril Ramaphosa demanded the release of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Ramaphosa also called for a return to civilian rule. The African Union has in the meantime suspended Mali's membership. The leaders of Mali's junta remain steadfast in claiming the coup was a necessary intervention.
As you know, Mali finds itself in a socio-political and security crisis, and we are not allowed to make any more mistakes. By intervening as we did, we have raised the country above.
Following their meeting, junta leaders met with Mahmoud Dicko. Dicko was one of the most prominent leaders of the June 5 movement. Comprised of a coalition of opposition voices, the movement led protests calling for Keïta's resignation. A spokesperson for Dicko has however said the Muslim cleric is withdrawing from politics. ECOWAS in the meantime has announced plans to send a delegation to the country. The mission will be charged with ensuring a return to democracy. Astatal, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council is the latest to condemn the military takeover in Mali, in which soldiers arrested the president, prime minister, and several government officials. The 15-member body has called for their immediate release and a return to law and constitutional order. Here's UN correspondent Liling Tan with the details.
It's the latest condemnation from the United Nations, with its most powerful arm, the Security Council, coming together to object to the mutiny in Mali and call for a return to constitutional order. The 15-member body also called for the immediate release of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta and the other government officials who were detained. It urged the soldiers to return to their barracks without delay. Now, the Council's members met in a virtual emergency meeting to address the political crisis in the West African country. The meeting, called at the request of France and Niger, sought to understand the unfolding events and address the fallout. The head of the United Nations Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, had briefed the Council. One of the key questions following the mutiny has been the fate of the United Nations peacekeeping mission there, known as MINUSMA. More than 15,600 troops and personnel are deployed there as part of the mission. Now, UN missions are mandated by the Security Council, but deployed with the consent of the host government. So it's unclear who is in charge of the government now, which means the fate of MINUSMA hangs in the balance.
Our colleagues on the ground are emphasizing that the work of the UN peacekeeping mission must and will continue in support of the people of Mali and in close liaison with the Malians, including with the Malian security and defense forces in the north and center, where the situation is still very worrying.
There is concern that the unrest could deepen into communal violence, worsen the humanitarian situation, and allow terrorist groups to further entrench themselves. leading to more bloodshed. Now, it remains unclear what specific or direct action the Security Council will take, but it has reiterated its support for the mediation efforts of ECOWAS, which is meeting on Thursday to weigh further action, and the African Union, which has suspended Mali's membership with the AU until a return to constitutional order. Li Tan for CGTN, New York.
Well, CGTN's Deji Badmus now joins us with an update on the situation in Mali. Deji, thank you so much for joining us. Deji, bring us up to speed on what the latest is from Bamako.
Well, thank you very much, Hannah. What's actually happening at the moment is that the leaders of the junta now are meeting with the opposition. They're trying to strike a deal with the opposition now to determine what way forward now. We still do not have any word at all about President Keita and, of course, the Prime Minister. But what the junta leaders are doing is to consolidate their hold on power, discuss with the opposition, and probably they would come out with some kind of timetable now on the transition now of power from the military to maybe probably a transition, civilian transition government now, and then maybe that transition government will decide when election will hold. But they're actually meeting with the opposition leaders and discussing the way forward. Anna?
So, Deji, ECOWAS has acted tough by rejecting the military coup and ordering sanctions against its ringleaders. Deji, why do you think ECOWAS has decided to take this route, and is it likely to produce any positive result?
Well, for now, it's too early to tell if it will produce any result at all. But I should say that ECOWAS did its best. Maybe what ECOWAS did not do was to analyze the political situation in Mali properly, and didn't really understand how deep-rooted the problem was, and never expected that things were going to escalate to this level. But of course, I mean, ECOWAS did all it could to broker peace. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But that's what you get when the majority of the people would appear to have been fed up with the outgone government now, and then the military cashed in on that. So what ECOWAS is doing now is standard procedure, recommending the closure of the borders of neighboring countries now to Mali, and also imposing sanctions and all of that. But the ECOWAS leaders are meeting today. That meeting is ongoing at the moment, and that meeting is quite crucial. I think it will determine the next step these leaders would take. So whatever further reactions we're going to get from ECOWAS, we would get to know after that meeting, even though ECOWAS continues to maintain that the process, it doesn't support it, and continues to recognize President Keita now as the president of Mali. But we just have to wait until that meeting is concluded. Then we have a clear idea what ECOWAS intends to do. But of course, no doubt at all that there will be more action now coming from ECOWAS. And then let me just say we have Achike Chude right here. I have him right here in the studio, and he's, of course, an African affairs analyst. And Achike, ECOWAS has been mediating in the situation in Mali now for quite some time. Why do you think that mediation has not worked?
Well, it's clear that perhaps I think somewhere along the line they also made mistakes in drawing up the right kind of analysis of the situation in Mali. But beyond that is the fact that when you go to the negotiating table, there are certain fundamentals. And I think one of these is that you have it at the back of your mind that you cannot be a win-all situation. And so I think if you look at it, when this negotiation started, the government at the time found it very difficult to resist the overtures by the ECOWAS. And that was why they made a lot of compromises. Of course, they made compromises with regards to the appointment of judges. They made compromises, in other aspects of the political quagmire. And of course, I think they were more or less in tandem with ECOWAS when it comes to the issue of formation of a government of national unity. But I think the major problem had to do with the opposition that wanted a win-all situation. The opposition had a single agenda demand, and that was that Ibrahim Abubakar, Keita must go. And so regardless of what ECOWAS put on the table, the opposition made up their mind that they were not going to move from that perspective.
Okay.
And so
eventually the opposition had its way, and President Boubacar Keïta eventually resigned. Now, the regional body has acted swiftly now in suspending Mali from the organization, as well as closing its member states' borders with Mali. Do you think that is enough? Or what is next for ECOWAS, in your own opinion?
Yeah, well, it's all about the pressure also, because the reality is that if the recent the junta and then the opposition stick to their guns, that the situation will remain as it is, then they also have to grapple with the economic consequences of that decision. The reality is that the sanctions will hit the Malian people very, very hard. And so they have no choice but also to negotiate again how to maneuver the situation. So it's not going to be easy for them. I see there must be some level of compromises that they have to make, because they are not in a position exactly to determine 100% what is going to happen with Mali, both now and in the future.
And the truth is that economic sanctions would do the people a lot of harm, especially at this time of the pandemic. Now, the ECOWAS leaders are actually holding a virtual summit as we speak. What do you expect to come out of that summit?
There is the fear that if they allow this to go, they will be setting a bad precedence for other countries within the sub-region. And they do not also forget the fact that there's just so much investment in trying to stem the tide of the instability in Mali. About $1.2 billion is being spent to maintain 15,000 troops that are in Mali. The French government has also been spending so much, and then ECOWAS countries have been doing the same. So to accept failure by allowing the present situation to remain as it is something that I think is very unwholesome and unpalatable, to the ECOWAS members. So I think they are going to ratchet up the pressure. They are going to make it very clear. Of course, you can see not just regional bodies or international bodies, but countries have also risen in condemnation. And I think that the junta and the opposition will begin to feel a lot of pressure. If you remember briefly, what happened in the Gambia, the same kind of pressure that was put in the Gambia. But most importantly, again, is the fact that if you allow this instability, it also has an effect in terms of the immigration that is going on, to parts of Europe. So they want to put a stop to that too by making sure that the situation is handled properly.
Well, no doubt a very fluid situation there in Mali. We'll just wait and see what the ECOWAS leaders would decide at the end of their meeting. But of course, no question at all that more actions are coming, and that the military in that country, I'm talking about Mali now, would definitely come under more severe pressure to hand over to a democratically elected government. Back to you now in the studio, Hannah.
Thank you for that, Deji. Deji Baden was joining us live there, speaking to us about the Mali situation, giving us an update. Let's move on to South Sudan now, where the army there says it has halted disarmament in the northern part of the country, where it clashed with armed civilians, leaving 150 people dead. South Sudan's People's Defense Force, however, says it's continuing disarming civilians in other parts of the country. The government launched the exercise across the country in a bid to stop intercommunal violence. CGTN's Patrick Liet spoke to South Sudan's People's Defense Force spokesperson, Major General Lul Kwang.
The civilians do not use guns for productive purposes. They use them for killing themselves. They also use them for killing security forces. So it is very important for these guns to be removed from the hands of civilians who are not authorized to carry them.
What are the reasons as to why many civilians have guns?
Civilians acquired guns for a number of reasons, primarily to defend themselves against insecurity. Secondly, it has become part of their livelihoods. They use guns also for hunting. It's also meant for social prestige, for marrying, paid for dowry. And then the other one is that during the wars, the government in the north also armed counter-insurgency movements, and as a result, civilians ended up getting guns in many ways, through many means.
The disarmament exercise that started, of course, started well, but we've seen clashes in some parts of the country, like in Warab State. How is the situation now?
The situation, law and order, was restored immediately. Civilians who had fled their homes were urged to return home. We took a number of steps to arrest the situation. First and foremost, we had arrested 2 soldiers that were involved in the initial disagreement. That was in the evening of 8th. We had appealed to the traditional leaders for them to identify 3 civilians that attacked our defensive position. An investigation is going to be sent to the area, high-level investigation committee, to find out exactly what had happened. The disarmament had been going on very well, with civilians being told to hand over their guns peacefully. We were calling it peaceful disarmament or voluntary disarmament, with the chiefs taking the lead. And as a result of that, we felt that the process will resume. We had put it on hold so that the debt could be buried. Some rituals are performed. The disarmament force that was involved in the fight is reorganized and given a new orientation. Then once we are done with that within the next few days, and then it will resume.
How important is disarmament for South Sudan now, and how serious is the problem of guns in the hands of the civilians?
The army is getting reunified. There is political agreement that had brought the leaders together. Now that all these arrangements are in place, then the National Army, that's the SPDF, will provide you security, and therefore there would be no reason for you to continue keeping guns.
Somalia has seen a significant reduction in the number of terrorist attacks in that country. The recent August 14th incident saw Mogadishu residents gather in large numbers to publicize their anger against the terrorist group Al-Shabaab. Government has begun recruiting new forces to combat Al-Shabaab by forming the October 14th Battalion. The troop is named after the infamous October 14th suicide attack in 2017 that claimed the lives of about 600 people in the capital. Analysts believe that these joint efforts to disapprove Al-Shabaab's actions has forced the group to review their plans, resulting in the reduction of the number of attacks in Somalia.
I want to take this opportunity to thank the Somali public for their support to the rule of law and them being against the terrorist Al-Shabaab who disrupt their peace. Had they not played their role, the government will not have achieved this. The government still counts on their support. We will forever need their support. A system of administration will not survive if they lack public support.
The fact that the public got tired of the chaos contributed to the significant reduction of the killings and explosions. The government can occasionally still accuse them of harboring terrorists in their homes and so on, but the reality that they got fed up with the destruction caused by the explosions from Al-Shabaab forced the significant reduction of the number of explosions in the country.
In news making headlines outside the continent, European leaders have rejected the results of the presidential election in Belarus and say sanctions are imminent for those responsible for the fraud and violent crackdown on protesters. Leaders held an emergency summit on Wednesday to discuss the worsening political crisis in that country, which serves as a buffer between Europe and Russia. Tony Waterman has more from Brussels.
EU leaders didn't hold back on what they thought of the recent elections in Belarus, which saw incumbent President Alexander Lukashenko extend his 26-year rule with 80% of the vote.
There is no doubt for us in the European Union that there have been massive violations of the rules. The elections were neither fair nor free, and therefore we cannot accept the results of the elections.
EU leaders vowed to sanction those responsible for the alleged election fraud and the bloody crackdown on protesters that followed. The blacklist, which Brussels says will include a substantial number of people, is already being drawn up and could include President Lukashenko himself.
The violence against these peaceful protesters was shocking and unacceptable. We condemn this brutality and expect a full and transparent investigation.
But as leaders hunker down in front of computer screens, President Lukashenko ordered the police to end the unrest in the capital Minsk, sparking concerns that another violent clampdown is imminent. While addressing his Security Council late Wednesday, Lukashenko told Western powers to focus on their own problems.
We will not waver. We will do things our way as we should. Those who today, especially abroad, and this is clearly visible, are plotting against us, they will get a serious rebuff.
Along with sanctions, Brussels is readying a $63 million support package for the Belarusian people. The bulk of the funds will go towards fighting coronavirus, but millions have been set aside to help victims of state violence and to support an independent media. Brussels has to tread carefully here because Belarus is not part of the EU, but rather serves as a buffer between the bloc and Russia. It doesn't want to appear to be interfering with Belarusian affairs, while Lukashenko insists that foreign powers are plotting to overthrow his government. This is part of the reason the phones at the Kremlin have been ringing off the hook. Putin is a key ally to Lukashenko, and EU leaders want him to help broker a peaceful solution. For now, Putin has preferred to stay on the sidelines. But as the crisis evolves, both Russia and the EU may find themselves playing an even bigger role. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including over 1,000 South African volunteers sign up for COVID-19 vaccine trial. And Europe opens up its markets for Kenya's flower industry.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, South Africa is playing a key role in the global research for a COVID-19 vaccine. 1,600 volunteers have already signed up for the first trial of a vaccine that is a non-replicating version of a common cold virus. It was developed in the UK and is being tested in England, Brazil, and South Africa. CGTN's Julie Shire brings us the details.
Volunteers for South Africa's first COVID-19 vaccine trial braved the cold and windy conditions in Soweto for the regular checkup at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital.
I think I'm lucky because I'm from the research world, so in many ways I knew that how safe the vaccine was. I wasn't particularly worried about it. I've had 2 doses now. The first one felt like somebody had punched my arm, and then that night I was very cold and shivery for about 10 minutes, and the night after. And the second time, as the vaccine went in, it was burning quite a lot.
This is one of the first vaccine trials in Africa that's been run simultaneously in a high-income country, and I think the significance of that for our population is huge. What it means is access to the vaccine will be accelerated, it will be much quicker, and I think it's essential.
The Wits University trial is the first on the continent and part of a global study also being conducted in the UK and Brazil.
After we've completed the enrollment of 2,000 participants, we need to then continue following them up until roughly about 42 of them develop COVID-19, at least 2 weeks after they've received the second dose of vaccine. Once that has happened, then we would be able to do an analysis to see whether the vaccine actually protects against COVID-19 or not.
South Africa is close to its peak with well over 500,000 cases. There's a marked 80% recovery rate, but thousands have already died.
We're trying to help the country so that we can limit the spread of the coronavirus and get the vaccine. I wanted to get more information about the COVID-19 and I also wanted to get my results and know whether if I'm negative or positive, and also know what are the precautions on how to prevent the COVID-19 from spreading.
Out here, numbers are surging, but inside one of South Africa's biggest hospitals, scientists are hard at work trying to find a solution for COVID-19.
So the reality is that even if this vaccine is shown to work, there's not going to be enough supply of the vaccine in the immediate future. There's no company in the world that is going to be able to produce billions of doses of vaccine over a short period of time. So what will likely need to occur is basically some sort of prioritization in terms of who should be vaccinated, not just in South Africa, but globally.
Wits University is set to begin a second trial on a new vaccine from the US. Health workers and the vulnerable are likely to be the first in line if any of the treatments prove effective. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
In the United States, Senator Kamala Harris has accepted the Democrat vice presidential nomination. This happened during the third night of the party's national convention. It makes her the first black woman and Asian American to run for the position. Former President Barack Obama and former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton spoke at the event, criticizing President Donald Trump. The president responded on Twitter, slamming Obama for not endorsing Biden sooner.
And let's be clear. There is no vaccine for racism. We've got to do the work. For George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for the lives of too many others to name, for our children, and for all of us.
I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously. That he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did. For close to 4 years now, he has shown no interest in putting in the work. No interest in finding common ground, no interest in using the awesome power of his office to help anyone but himself and his friends. No interest in treating the presidency as anything but one more reality show that he can use to get the attention he craves. Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't.
I wish Donald Trump knew how to be a president, because America needs a president right now. For 4 years, people have told me, I didn't realize how dangerous he was. I wish I could do it all over. Or worse, I should have voted. Look, this can't be another woulda, coulda, shoulda election. If you vote by mail, request your ballot now and send it back right away. If you vote in person, do it early. Become a poll worker. Most of all, no matter what, vote.
The coronavirus pandemic has affected many industries in Africa, from transportation, education, the food and beverage industry. In an attempt to stay afloat, businesses have been adapting to the new normal. In our continuing Africa Under COVID series, we take a look at how the pandemic has affected businesses. The flower industry in Kenya is slowly picking up after a tough start to the year. This is largely due to the easing of restrictions in Europe that has seen markets opening up. CGTN's Nick Mudimba visited Kenya's flower capital of Naivasha, and here's what he found.
2020, a year many would want to forget, especially those in the flower industry. Gradually, though, things are beginning to turn rosy. We visit Nini Flowers in Naivasha, Kenya, a leading exporter to many parts of the world. Here, it's business unusual and stability slowly being achieved after a difficult season. Workers are getting back to work, from harvesters to the packaging personnel, all are ready for another, hopefully, brighter season.
It has been difficult, especially the month of March and April were very, very difficult for us. It was just coming at the heel of the biggest sale we usually have, which is Valentine's. We do almost half of our sales during Valentine's, and we were just coming out of that. That means that we were still selling. And then suddenly we have a drop in the sales because we lacked demand.
Cultivating high-quality flowers for the world market requires enormous resources and time. These farmers employed more workers. They are eager and determined to put the past behind them.
It's been a tough season for flower farmers here in Kenya. At some point, they were harvesting for dumping, but right now the workers are slowly gaining the confidence in their employers with the fact that also they're getting back to work as usual. Now, there's something special about these farms is that they can't really waste a day without harvesting. Sometimes even harvesting comes after hours, meaning that they have to be at work all the times. It was so catastrophic that they were harvesting for dumping.
The Kenya Flower Council wants freight services between Kenya and global markets to be increased. The produce is now at 80%, and if more cargo flights are increased and freight charges lowered, then the industry will be on the path to recovery. The floriculture sector was losing $30,000 a day 3 months ago.
And government has pledged to plug in 1.5 billion Kenya shillings into this to help us. We hope that it will come soon. We have lobbied around VAT, our VAT refunds, and at some point, a few months ago, they released about 60% of the VAT refunds, and that has helped a bit to cushion the growers on the liquidity side so that we continue operating.
It's full house in most of the departments at this farm, and operations are almost back to optimum levels.
We cannot survive without them. They are very important. We will try to keep 100% of our permanent workers as possible. As the market opens up and production goes up, then we are committed to admitting everyone back onto their jobs.
They say in every town there's a signal of a flower. It's been a rough patch for most of the flower workers here in Kenya. And right now they're all smiles because they can go home knowing tomorrow they have somewhere to go to. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Naivasha, Kenya.
We'll now move up north to Egypt, where 25-year-old Mohammed El Kholi has scooped a United Nations award for fighting misinformation on COVID-19. The graduate in medicine is using digital platforms to create awareness, especially among the youth. Our correspondent Adel Al-Marouchi caught up with him in Cairo.
مستمعينا الكرام، أهلا ومرحبا بكم في الحلقة الأولى من برنامج بير كاست، البرنامج اللي بيقدم من خلال شبكة الأقران للشباب مصر واي بير ايجيبت. هكون معاكم أنا محمد الخولي في بودكاست من الشباب إلى الشباب. النهاردة هي انطلاقة
Mohammed El Kholi is a man on a mission. He keeps close tabs on social media and follows the flow of information around COVID-19. He pounces on the slightest bit of misinformation, swiftly offering up the facts. El Kholi is part of an international youth network known as YPeer.
The concept of YPeer is to enlighten your peers, to raise awareness among them. Peers are my friends, colleagues at work, neighbors and family members. This way, ideas and information can spread fast and we can learn a lot.
El Kholi is a medical school graduate, but he doesn't practice as a doctor. Instead, his work revolves around public health. When COVID-19 struck in Egypt, he chose to focus on awareness. Initially, he concentrated on videos, but they failed to appeal to younger viewers, so he switched to podcasts.
We wanted the content to be appealing, so we decided to do a Q&A. The episode asks questions about commonly known misinformation, and a professional clarifies the truth, whether it's from the WHO or Ministry of Health. Audio content had great impact. Whenever you are on the move, audio is more practical. It's not easy when you drive or walk.
Each episode features an expert from the World Health Organization or the Egyptian Health Ministry. And to maintain social distancing, all his episodes have been produced remotely.
The UN has featured our story on its website as one of the most significant projects in the world facing COVID-19 misinformation. This was a great push. We started domestically, then regionally through the UN country office. Now it's becoming a global move.
وتم العمل عليها في فترة الكوفيد في مصر.
YPeer has some 40,000 volunteers and 300 NGOs supporting its initiatives. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, after the break, we delve into the world of finance. Here's what we'll be looking at. South Africa's businesses crumble after lockdown economic restrictions. And work on Tanzania's controversial $3 billion refugee dam kicks off.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
It's time now for the business news. South Africa has officially moved into level 2 of its nationwide lockdown. More restrictions on the economy have been lifted, but not all businesses which were closed under prior restrictions will be able to reopen. Many companies and businesses suffered under the country's deeply restrictive lockdown. Most were compelled to lay off staff or wind up. CGTN Sumitra Naidu reports.
The government acted quickly to curb the spread of COVID-19. But the pain of almost all economic activity being shut down will be felt for a long time to come. Many of those businesses that are still operational were assisted by a massive contribution from the private sector. South Africa's big banks have made over $2.7 billion available to those in need.
This relief is not exactly a grant, it's more of a deferment in most cases. People are basically allowed to defer payments for a few months until cash flows come back online. It would make sense because banks are supposed to be guarantees of deposits of their clients.
Loans with special conditions are available to ensure businesses remain operational and, more importantly, to keep staff employed.
One of these revisions is clients being able to access the loan over a longer period. Some of the changes include that the bank credit assessment and loan approvals will be more discretionary and less restrictive in line with the objectives of the scheme. And this is the recent revisions to the loan guarantee scheme. Larger businesses can now apply as well, and that's more helpful because larger businesses tend to employ more people. So again, helpful from an economic activity point of view, but also from an employment point of view.
The loans can be used for operational expenses such as salaries, rates and taxes, to honour lease agreements and even for contracts with suppliers. The banks received close to 50,000 applications. Over 84% of individuals and over 95% of business applicants have since received support funding.
What's most helpful is keeping this loan going now that the economy is restarting and reopening. So allowing businesses to have this facility to build their operations over the next 6 months, because businesses now more than ever need to have the confidence that they can actually expand and grow. Otherwise, how will we see economic recovery?
We reached about 3 million incomes lost in the period of the lockdown. Look at or compare it to the amount that government's made available for instance, loan guarantees. Initially they said 100 billion and they pushed it up to as much as 200 billion. It could be possible that many people are unaware of the processes or are fearful of being denied, despite the fact that the vast majority of people that do apply appear to be getting relief.
It will take time before the South African economy can get stronger. Ongoing assistance from the private sector will be key, but government needs to tackle corruption urgently before there's any real improvement. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, South Sudan Central Bank has lowered its policy rate by 300 basis points to 10% as it tries to mitigate the economic damage inflicted by the pandemic on Africa's youngest country. CGTN's Patrick Oyet has the latest from Juba.
South Sudan Central Bank says lowering the interest rates should encourage spending on credit and investment and help stimulate the country's sagging economy.
The downward revisions of the central bank rate to 10% is meant to reduce the overall cost of financing extended to private sector by commercial banks. Affordable loans will benefit business and South Sudanese citizens alike at this time of crisis.
But one challenge for the Juba-based Bank of South Sudan is that many businesses and individuals in the country rely on cash and don't hold bank accounts. Experts say that limits the impact the central bank can have.
In order to make right policies, it is good to have an overview and control over the quantity and the flow of the money in the country.
The Apex Bank in South Sudan says it is also lowering the cash reserve from 15 to 10% to reduce economic hardships on individuals and businesses during this period of the pandemic. Economic experts say lowering the cash reserve ratio means commercial banks can lend more money to businesses and households since the mandatory amount required to be kept in reserve is lower. However, some economists argue that for South Sudan's economy to fully function well, more work still needs to be done.
The struggles of the economy in South Sudan is largely due to several factors that of course includes the inability of the central bank to carry out a robust macroeconomic policy and monetary policies that can regulate the financial sector, and also the fact that the public financial management process in the government is hugely influenced by in discipline, I would say, in spending by different spending agencies.
The Bank of South Sudan says it has a number of measures in place to help the economy navigate the adverse effects caused by the pandemic. The central bank says the coronavirus pandemic is a wake-up call for South Sudan's financial sector. It says reducing interest rates is one way it can try and encourage greater investment into the economy at this challenging time. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
However, in Tanzania, construction has begun on the controversial $3 billion Refugee hydropower plant. Once complete, the facility will have an installed generation capacity of 2.1 gigawatts. The dam is being built in a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is home to many threatened species. CGTN's Daniel Kija has the details.
East Africa's biggest energy project is looking to make a bang. The 2,115 megawatt Julius Nyerere hydropower station will be the fourth biggest dam in Africa and ninth in the world. It was a vision that was first pushed forward by Julius Nyerere, Tanzania's founding father. Construction has begun, and the plan should be finished within 2 years, paid by the government.
Up to now, the government has fully paid $560 million. The money's there. Whenever the contracts need to be paid, the government pays. And this is money collected from Tanzanians.
The government says this is the biggest energy project the country has ever undertaken. Upon completion, it's expected to double electricity generation. With this project, Tanzania should join only a few other African countries that have electricity in both rural and urban areas. And the government says that this increased power supply is not just about domestic use, but could push economic growth too. The power project is being constructed by a joint venture of Egyptian companies, Arab contractors, and El Swedi Electric Co. It has employed hundreds, and 80% of the staff are local.
Up to now, there are 3,897 employees at the site. They're working hard. Our goal is to get to 6,000 workers.
Environmentalists at UNESCO have raised concerns about the insufficient strategic environmental assessments of the hydropower project, but the government maintains the impacts will be minimal. Historically, 45% of the power sector of Tanzania has been generated through hydropower, but this plant was first dreamed of more than 50 years ago. And now, and just after half a century later, it may, at last, be about to bring power to millions of people's homes. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. We'll be back shortly.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, now for our continued look at the wildebeest migration in Kenya. The spectacular crossover from the Mara to the Serengeti is on. Meanwhile, along the banks, the struggle for the fittest is tight. Today we take a look at how that plays out. The king of the jungle and the leopard are our focus.
Yesterday on CGTN's Digital Safari, harrowing scenes unfolded in the Masai Mara. The wildebeest herds attempted to get an early start, but in the panic and chaos, many fell victim to being trampled. Some were lucky enough to survive the frantic crossing. Others later succumbed to their injuries. And an ill-fated few were condemned to wait for death, wedged between the bodies of their fallen companions. Meanwhile, in a much colder South Africa, we were witness to a pride of lions gorging themselves on the remains of a large giraffe. Uncertain of when they would get another meal, these lions overindulged on the massive carcass, many of them falling asleep while eating. Luckily over in Tswalu, this journey of giraffes was able to dodge the unpleasant fate that had befallen their ally in Ngala. Although the freezing winds has sent most animals running for shelter, a couple of curious leopard cubs braved the shivery elements as they wanted to explore and play as most youngsters do. Some astonishing birding was on offer in Juma. The array of colors on show from the lilac-breasted roller alone are spectacular. But we were also treated to a sighting of the extremely camera-shy green-winged Pytilia. Join us every day at 4:30 GMT on CGTN digital platforms for your very own virtual safari through the African wild.
A sight not to be missed. Well, we are going to take a short break and return your sport action, including CAF sets new dates for postponed 2022 World Cup and 2021 AFCON qualifying fixtures.